Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. A little Pennsylvania-centric to start off, as the right wing all warm and fuzzy, all tingly in the panties, and all so happy because a court here in Pennsylvania struck down Act 77. Act 77 was a Republican-led initiative, and I love when you get to the important parts, because the Republicans are all thrilled. They undid it. It's unconstitutional. It's going to overturn the 2020 elections. Donald Trump's going to be president. Yeah. And we're going to win all this other stuff. Yeah. Except, well, it's still got to go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So don't get all happy just yet. But this is one of those things that really is a struggle. Because understand, this bill, this Act 77, this is what Republicans wanted. In 2019, this was their baby. And I know everyone's saying, oh, it was a bipartisan bill. There were only a handful. If I remember, only one Democratic senator voted for it. And I think only a couple of Democrats in the House. This was not wild bipartisanship. It's just, it happened. The governor signed it, said, okay, we're going to do a couple of good things and do a bad thing. Look, Democrats didn't want to get rid of single party voting. Like you here in Pennsylvania, you used to be able to go in and check the box that I'm going to vote for a Republican, or I'm going to vote for all the Democrats, or I'm going to, you used to be able to do that. You used to be able to vote straight party line ticket. Republicans hated that because in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth, there are a lot more registered Democrats than there are Republicans. And they figure, hey, if we can cheat people, if we can, make them think that, hey, there aren't as many, they'll have a better chance of winning elections. This was the thought, because understand, here in this state also, you could cross-file in the primaries, and there's a whole bunch of nonsense that goes on. But Republicans were thrilled that they were getting this Act 77 pushed through, which would eliminate that. But it also did some stuff that Republicans wanted as well. It got rid of no excuse mail-in ballot voting, because a lot of their voters are a little older. And, a little at this time, now remember, this is pre-pandemic. This is pre-COVID. They were thrilled because, hey, we're going to get more of our people to be able to vote. It extended the mail-in period time to 50 days. It was great. Permitted mail-in and absentee ballot lists. Things for the counties to be able to mail stuff out. This was Republicans doing this. 15 days more to register to vote. Extended the mail-in and absentee submission deadlines, get more people to vote. This was touted as bipartisan, although most of the Democrats didn't come along with it because they didn't want to lose the party line vote. The governor did sign it. It was a good deal until the pandemic hits, and then everybody, especially Democrats now, who are going, well, we actually think the virus is real. We actually think that, going in a place where large numbers of people breathing on each other is a bad idea. They decided to use it. And then, Republicans are like, no, what we did, bad. And now they're on the flip side of this, which is weird. But it's very, very Republican. It is what they do. It is that kind of Janus face kind of policy that we want what we want until we get it and it hurts us. This is that. So they're all tizzy in the panties. They're all oh boy, like JoJo the Idiot Boy running around, thrilled that the court has ruled this unconstitutional. The state Supreme Court, I have confidence that the state Supreme Court will go the other way. Because after all, it was passed by the legislature. And the Republicans, that's the part that gets me. That's the amazing part. So, fun. A little more fun. Joe Biden was in Pennsylvania today. The president was visiting Pittsburgh to tout his infrastructure plan. Now remember, as I've said from the beginning, 1.2 trillion is a good number. It is nowhere near where we need to be. In fact, back in 2017, as part of the American Society of Civil Engineers report card, they said in 2017, by 2020, that was how long ago? That was 2 years ago. They said by 2 years ago, we needed 3.6 trillion in investment. And as you costed it out to now, that number is up to 4.6 trillion. And, we've got 1.2, going to take us back to where we should have been in 2020. But hey, great investment. Needed it. The nation, a D plus in overall infrastructure back in 2017. I've done a little bit here around the edges, not much, still not great. So today the president's going to go and going to have an event, going to talk about all the jobs that we're going to create, all of the infrastructure we're going to rebuild. It's going to be great. And to highlight that, a 50-year-old bridge in Pittsburgh decided it was time to take a city bus and a bunch of cars 150 feet down into a ravine and collapse. And that is what happened at 6:39 this morning, forcing rescuers to rappel down into this ravine, forming a human chain to pull people out of this municipal bus. And I'm not talking about those little buses. I'm talking about those giant city block, bendy kind of buses that you see 150 feet down. It is amazing. The report that I saw, only 10 people injured. It is amazing that nobody died. It is amazing that's all there was. Now there could be more injuries since then, but it's amazing that that's what it was. Now, as I point out, Pennsylvania has had this kind of need for a very long time, and in fact, Pennsylvania has almost 23,000 bridges, of which almost 4,200 of them classified in poor condition. So you're looking at a large percentage of our bridges not good. And I remember back in 2012 when the Republican legislature here decided that they were going to make 2012 the year of the Bible. And I was like, great, it's a good time. 2012 would be a good time to bring prayer back because we had a lot more structurally deficient bridges back then. In fact, from that point till now, it's gotten better. It used to be almost a quarter of our bridges were crap. Now it's just down to 18%. And it was because a little bit of money that they put into it. But I said back then, it's a good thing because, people are going to need to pray a little bit more to get to the other side of the bridge. And I took some heat from that because people said, well, we've haven't invested enough. Just like this 1.2 trillion isn't enough. But understand, Pennsylvania's bridges are 15 years older than the national average. We've got more than double the national averages for the rating of poor. So this was the right place for Joe Biden to be, the right place to come in and say, hey, by the way, we're gonna create some jobs by building infrastructure, and I guess the point was made a little bit. Now I'm not hearing anybody other than me going 1.2 trillion is okay. We need more. We need more investment. We need to, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, these aren't hippie liberals. These are folks who just look at the facts. $4.6 trillion is what we need today. So we're a little bit behind. And if you think our bridges are bad, you should check out our roads. 43% of our roads have been rated as fair or poor for surface pavement. And go, how'd that happen? Well, it happened because we gave so much tax money away to corporate America. We gave so much away to the millionaires and the billionaires and all the beggar thy neighbor economic development and all the stuff, all the charter school nonsense. We've done it all. We have done it all. And today it came out, and a bridge outside of Pittsburgh collapsed with a city bus on it. Now, like I said, thank goodness nobody was seriously hurt or killed, and you're lucky in those moments. And we as Americans really are. I was thinking about this today. Someone told me, I was talking with somebody, and they go, the sad reality is, and it's not sad, but he said the reality in this moment is, Americans don't know what it's like to suffer and struggle anymore. when we see this, we go, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But in the past, this kind of stuff happened a lot. Before we had functional government, before when we were run by oligarchs, before when everything was for profit, or when nothing was in the hands of we the people. This kind of stuff happened. And before we had regulation, before we had OSHA, people were dying at work. Before we had, sane consumer regulations, people were getting sick and all kinds of stuff. And we have forgotten that. And I look at these moments and I go, when he said that to me, that Americans have forgotten to struggle, what it's like to struggle, what it's like to suffer, and thus has made us, all of us, harsh, hardened, less empathetic, less willing to reach out. And there's a number of us that are like that because we don't remember what it's like. And I think back to some of the people that I've met when I was younger, people who lived through the Depression, where their working life was the Depression, the stories they told, the pain that they carried. We're in this moment now where everyone's a victim, everyone's a survivor, everyone's this or something. It's always something. And, we suffer almost nothing compared to those generations. And that's a good thing. But what ends up happening is we end up ripping each other apart. And, I'm struggling in these moments because, a story came up that I brought up to this person. I said, we've almost 3/4 of the country's got at least one dose of the vaccine. The number I saw was like 77%. And in low-income countries, in poorer countries who are literally dying to get the vaccine, you've got less than 10% of people who are vaccinated. You go to good parts of Africa, parts of the poorer parts of Asia. You've got people who aren't getting access to it. It's not that they don't want it; it's that it's not there, and it's not coming. And I know we're shipping hundreds of millions of doses around the world, and we're doing all this stuff. We've got people here. We got a bunch of people up in Canada going to drive around complaining that I shouldn't have to get one. While there are people around the world who desperately want, and are struggling because they can't get it. And I guess that's where, the comment that this guy made was, I kind of took to heart that we've forgotten what it's like to struggle for the mass of us. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who aren't struggling. There are. But not like you see in some of these places. And, while Joe Biden is going around talking about rebuilding infrastructure and returning manufacturing back to the country, he's talking about jobs. He's talking about making lives better. And when, Joe Biden's going, we're going to bring jobs in, all we get from the right is hate and division. Because it's all we get. It's all they've got. There's nothing more. Now remember, Donald Trump said he was going to be the guy who was going to return manufacturing. He was going to rebuild the working class. He was going to bring back the 50s. Didn't do it. Nowhere close. A lot of rhetoric. Talked a great game. Not very good on the actual follow through. So Biden's doing this, bringing back manufacturing, bringing back jobs, creating a future, and all we get from the right is hate, fear, and smear. And, athletes are dying on the field because they got the vaccine, like Ron Johnson said. Caravans of illegals, this is coming back, it. They're going to be waltzing into the country because of Joe Biden, just know it. Or my favorite, the transgenders are coming back. You can't wait for this nonsense because it is what they do, because it's all they've got. Fear and smear, that's it. So while Biden's doing the job, while he's getting out there and attempting to rebuild our country, what you've got is fear and smear. Every time Biden wins, they turn up the hate. Every time Biden wins, they turn up the hate because it's all they've got. Biden wants to build back better, and they want to tear us apart. It's the difference between building a better, more prosperous nation for all of us and the status quo where a handful win. Every time you hear a Republican tear down what this administration is doing on the infrastructure front, tearing apart the Build Back Better plan, It's not because they care about the deficits. It's not because they care about spending. It's not because they care about smaller, less intrusive government. They don't care about any of that nonsense. They want the status quo. They want the rich to do better and the poor to not. This is what they do. This is who they are. That is not going to change. And this is one of those moments. I look at this tragedy in Pittsburgh, and fortunately, as I said, no one lost their lives. But this is one of those moments where we point to why? Why are we in this position? Why was that bridge not tended to for the last several years? Why do we have so many bridges that are deficient? Why are our roads so bad? Why are our ports, our parks, our railroads? Why are all these things? Why did this happen? And it happened because, well, we have one political party and parts of the other saying that government can't do anything. We need to privatize. That there should be nothing in the hands of we the people, nothing in the hands of the commons, everything for profit. We need to give all the money to the wealthy because they know what to do with it. And you know what they do? You know what they do with it? They make themselves richer. You know what they don't do with it? They don't invest in infrastructure. They don't pave the roads. They don't rebuild the bridges. They don't care about public transit because they don't take it. That's for us. That's for the rabble, the unwashed masses. And until we wake up and realize that all of these are working class issues and that the Republicans are on the wrong side of history right now, and maybe I'm reaching out to my Republican friends, take your party back to somewhere near sane. Bring them back into the ballpark because we need them too. In order for this country to move forward and us to have that more perfect union, we have to be somewhere near somewhere near sane. That's all I'm asking. Now, with the Ted Cruzes of the world and how many Republicans did vote for the infrastructure bill? I think 13 in the House, was that it? And none in the Senate? And I know it's bipartisan. Not really. And you look at all these people who are running around saying, look at how great this infrastructure is that I didn't vote for. Got to hold them accountable, especially at the ballot box. Got lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Max Burns is going to be here, columnist over at the Daily Beast, to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Quick break. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Let's talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Carmelita Torres led the Bath riots at the El Paso-Juarez border. Mexican workers traveled daily across the Santa Fe Bridge from Juarez, Mexico, into El Paso, Texas for work. As a condition of entry, workers were required to strip naked and be sprayed with a toxic mixture of chemicals. U.S. health officials insisted they were trying to stop the spread of typhus through this type of delousing campaign. However, they were just as motivated by racist typecasting of Mexicans as dirty. David Dorado Romo, author of Ringside to a Revolution, tells the story of 17-year-old Carmelita Torres. Amid rumors that health workers secretly photographed and then distributed photos of the naked women as they were being sprayed, Carmelita crossed into El Paso every day where she worked as a maid. But on this day, instead of stripping down, she refused fumigation and convinced the other women to demonstrate with her against this humiliating daily procedure. Within an hour, she and 200 other women had blocked all traffic coming into El Paso. Newspaper reports claimed several thousand protesters by the end of the day. The women marched to the disinfection camp, hoping to convince those undergoing disinfection to join them. When health officials tried to disperse the crowd, they were met with rocks and bottles. The women then laid down on the trolley tracks to stop the delivery of more workers and wrestled with motormen for control of the cars. The riots lasted for 3 days, but the spraying of Mexican workers with DDT and other toxic chemicals continued for more than 40 years. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying for a while, I'm literally shocked at how the Republicans a lot of Republicans have sided on the side of Putin in this Ukraine situation. I guess I'm probably not surprised. They've shown us don't really care about home. They don't really care about our country unless they're in charge and running it into the ground. But I'm also wondering how they're going to come out around what's going on in China and what we saw today. China is warning the U.S. that there could be war over Taiwan because, they're feeling their britches right now. They're feeling a little emboldened by what's going on with Putin and really the division here at home. And that to me is, something that needs to be addressed. And maybe we are. Maybe that's going to happen. That's why I've asked Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a columnist over at the Daily Beast. He's also a political strategist and one of the smart guys that I look to for some good advice. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm looking at this story with Taiwan, and Taiwan's always been the sticking point with China. In fact, if I remember right, they made John Cena learn Mandarin to apologize over just recognizing that it exists. This is one of those sore points, and we seem to be really divided, except maybe on the Chinese competition part. There's a piece of legislation banging around that might actually hold China in check.
Yeah, and this is really foot stomping by China. You called it correctly. This is looking at America's perceived weakness with relation to Russia and its threats to invade Ukraine and seeing what they can get away with. And the truth is, China's future, if it wants to continue to corrupt and to build its power, is not through direct conflict, and it knows that. It's through using things like money laundering and illicit finance to really tip the scales in their favor. And one of the things in this America Competes bill that was introduced in the House with Nancy Pelosi saying she wants to pass it as soon as possible is strengthening the global Magnitsky Act, which provides really tough sanctions for money laundering, for illicit finance, for using the government to compel businesses through bribes. And that's the kind of tool that we need now more than ever.
The Magnitsky Act, wait a second, that sounds really familiar. Wasn't there a meeting somewhere in Trump Tower about something about that? Did I miss something there?
Allegedly, I would be surprised if the Magnitsky Act came up once in that conversation, but ostensibly, yeah. This is an issue that's been bipartisan as well. I mean, this was authorized in 2016. It was reauthorized. It's coming up again, and now there's a push to expand its powers, to expand the classes of crime that qualify for sanctions, essentially freezing the assets of powerful government officials or businesses that are linked to governments that are corrupt. And that's how you break down a place like China or a place like Russia. You're not going to want to fight them on the ground. You fight them in the banks.
Yep. No, and I've said for the longest time, we're hopefully never going to get into a boots on the ground war with either of them because it would be devastating. It would be bloody. Now I'm not going to say one way or another. I know we would come out victorious. I got to say that, but I got to tell you, they got enormous armies. It's going to be cyber warfare, and it's going to be this kind of stuff. It's going to be this kind of backdoor stuff that Republicans don't seem to want this administration to do well on. I look at what's her name, Nikki Haley, saying Biden and Harris, they should resign over what they're doing. I'm going, wait a second, did I miss something?
Yeah, it's shocking because this sort of cybersecurity, chasing down illicit finance, chasing down government money laundering used to be a really bipartisan issue. It was Republicans who used to have the policy edge on this. They made it a major priority under the Bush administration. But oddly, as soon as we got a president in Donald Trump who had numerous shady dealings with autocratic regimes, the interest in actually policing this evaporated. And it not only became something Republicans didn't want to do, it became a bad thing to say Russia shouldn't be allowed to use cryptocurrency to launder money to attack and kill journalists. Suddenly, this was not our responsibility to deal with, even as they were using and manipulating American financial institutions to do it.
So now you think this American Competes Act, you think this could pass?
I do. I think this is sort of the House's response to what the Senate passed in its China bill. They're going to go into conference together, and there's going to be some stuff that the left wants that it's probably not going to get. There's going to be some stuff that Joe Manchin says he absolutely will need. And that's going to be the process. But we do, I believe, have a bipartisan vote for this when it goes into committee, or when it comes out of committee to the Senate, just as it was the first time.
I hope so, because look, it's all fun and games when you're fighting, you're having your pie fight. But I'm looking at Russia, I'm looking at China. These are real, very serious actors. The way we appear from the outside, this kind of division where we look like we can't get anything done, is really, in my view, a sign of weakness. And I think everyone would agree. From the outside, if you're looking in, we look like we're split down the middle and we're about ready to start shooting each other, let alone worrying about jumping into a war with China or Russia. So, I mean, just from the outside, something that unites us has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it really empowers propaganda. It's no mistake that in Russia, you see the Putin government and his henchmen pushing a message of how can the United States lecture us on stable governments and democracies. Their own people attacked the Capitol on January 6th and tried to overthrow the country. That's worse than Russia is. That's the propaganda they send. And this inability to work together, it doesn't just hurt Democrats or Joe Biden. It hurts America's perception in the world. And that has real effects.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we have to take on China and undo some of the damage that we've allowed to have happen over the last 22 years. The fact that we have handed them our manufacturing base. This is something that should be nonpartisan. This should be one of those things that we demand as a society for everyone. And look, I'm looking at Intel bringing jobs back to Ohio. I'm looking at GM, building plants in Michigan. There are battery plants popping up. There's a lot of manufacturing returning, and that's how we're going to be able to compete. I think the pandemic raised some awarenesses that you and I probably had well before the pandemic, but now it's kind of put it front and center. Which is why I think this kind of thing is so very important. So in looking at this, does this do much to help with our ability to bring jobs back, to save jobs, to save the future jobs going to be created? What does it do? What does it do on the other side besides going after the oligarchs and their money?
Yep. So the big portion of this is there's a $50 billion investment here to build domestic semiconductor capacity. We essentially stopped competing in semiconductors decades ago. And these have been the major pinch point for the entire supply chain. We've seen prices shoot up on everything from cars to computers to toasters because they all run in large part on semiconductors. And those are made in China and they have very strict export controls. China's main concern isn't the health of the American market, it's the health of the Chinese market. And we've realized almost too late that having this critical dependency, we can't build military weaponry, military aircraft. We can't build learning technology for schools without semiconductors, and that is a national security concern. Yeah. That we are so easily driven to scarcity on this is a major hole, and it shows that we can quickly be starved out in a technology race.
But this isn't new, though, Max. I mean, this is stuff that I've been talking about for a couple of decades now. The good folks over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing wrote a book with Tom Ridge back, I think it was 2010, where they went through all of the things that our military had already outsourced I would argue a lot of it in violation of the Berry Amendment. But, it's one of these things where We don't make certain screws for this. We don't make the magnets to make the smart bombs go where they're supposed to go. And we certainly, as you pointed out, don't make the smart chips that make the smart bombs smart. And we're dependent on China. And you go, wait a second, if we ever were to get into a war with China, because they are still an adversary, do you think that they would give us the chips to make our smart bombs to drop on them? No. So how did we get into this mess outside of corporate greed and CEOs' addiction to cheap labor and exploitable environmental regulations? How else did we get there?
Well, this is the end result of globalization. This is a push for cheaper products at every point, without regard for human rights, without regard for labor laws, without any future planning. If you look now at Russia and China and the things that they export to their rivals, Russia can effectively buy the UK, France, and Germany out of any conflict by simply threatening to flip the switch and turn off the natural gas and oil pipeline that it sends to Europe. And then it's lights out. China can lock us out of our own economy by simply refusing to send semiconductors our way if it got to that point. We have not been building industry with the thought that we used to be very clear on, that it is both an economic boon to us to produce certain things, and it's also a defensive long-term strategy to prevent dependence on people who are not allies. We knew this for decades, and it's in no small part the decline of unions and the decline of union advocacy of that point that has led to this really weak position we're in.
Yeah, and I would also argue it's, we've been sold this idea that, we can have a basket full of cheap junk for $50, and live the high life and not worry about jobs. We've all become consumers and forgotten that we're workers, and we were, as long as we were getting our fix of cheap stuff, we seem to be okay with losing jobs. Well, we're now in a moment where 70,000 factories have been lost of more than 500 workers at a factory. We've lost millions of manufacturing jobs. And you go, well, yeah, those are just those dirty jobs. No, but what we lost was the supply chain that we needed to get through a pandemic, the supply chain that we definitely need to supply our military, to supply our healthcare, as you point out, our education, everything, which is why I've always been a supporter of domestic production for domestic consumption. We should be building what we need right here at home without question.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you're going to see a lot of bipartisan support for this. It's a big reason why this is also attached to $500 billion in green energy investment and research credits and support for American energy industries. You'll see that pass, which normally would not get any Republican support, because it's tied to this very clear national security imperative that these domestic industries we're building are not just going to be in blue states. This is going to lift all boats, and it's going to create better security over a generation. And that's the kind of legacy thing that even Republicans would like to go home and crow about.
Yeah, you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Max Burns. Max is a Democratic strategist, daily columnist over at the Daily Beast. You can check out his work over at thedailybeast.com. We'll get links out on how you can do that. Are you looking at this moment kind of like I am? And I was very hopeful for Joe Biden at the very beginning, sans Joe Manchin, and I think we still could do some things. But I was hoping this was going to be kind of a reset moment, where we fight back against a lot of the neoliberal nonsense that got us into the position that we're in. With our trade policies, we were able to reshore some manufacturing, create some jobs at home, but also begin to geopolitically kind of move some things around, become less dependent on the world, and make other people less dependent. The green energy part that you just brought up is that is the future of our security. And I don't think we say that enough, because you look at what's going on with Germany. Germany sent 5,000 helmets to Ukraine, and you go, oh, wow, were they bike helmets? Because they don't want the gas shut off. They're afraid they're dependent on Russia to get through the winter. We can never be in that position. And I think if we do more on the green energy front, maybe we could be the one that helps Germany and other countries not be dependent too.
Yeah, and I think there is this broad and belated push to look at energy as fully a national security issue. It's not some Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants windmills in your backyard socialist stuff. This is, do you want your military to be able to have the fuel and the vehicles and the capacity to respond in a crisis when we will not have time to sort supply chains or call allies to get shipments of gasoline? We need to have everything ready and domestic. And that solves that problem. The challenge is our enemies have been thinking about this much more purposefully than we have for decades.
Especially now, all of this stuff coming to a head, in the next couple of weeks and months, because, I'm sure Putin knows, like everybody else, he reads, our news probably better than most Americans do. But like the Cook report came out today and said that, we're 10 months from election time and all signs lead to the Democrats getting wiped out. So, Putin's looking at this, the Chinese are looking at this, and they're divided, they're torn apart. We're going to get everything we want. And because while we're fighting each other, while we're divided and fighting each other, they're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's working for them. I mean, there are 100,000 Russian troops on the border with Ukraine right now, fully conscious that that's the largest Russian military buildup since the height of the Cold War, as the Defense Department said. And the expectation is nothing will come from this from the United States, that Republicans will stand in the way of any attempt to respond to this fully, just to block Joe Biden. And I can't imagine how that must look with Putin and his allies, and what message that must send to how far you can push. I mean, now the question isn't, are they going to take a few areas on the border of Ukraine? Now we have the Defense Department talking about a full-on invasion of the entire nation. And that is a radical escalation. Absolutely.
No, I fully believe that, Putin wants to get the whole gang back together. And this being the first part of it. If Ukraine falls, the rest of it isn't probably far behind.
Yeah. And this time it's the Cold War, except that we're the superpower who can't keep it together internally enough to actually effectively respond to these problems.
That is
and
an
there
excellent
are
point.
answers. There are right answers that we can do. And we've chosen so far not to do them. And that is a choice that will cost us dearly if we keep down this path.
Yeah, but I look at some of these statements by some of these Republicans, and I know that they just think it's political gamemanship and they're scoring points, and they don't think anybody outside of our borders is paying attention, but they are. This kind of internal division. Look, if we want to bicker over stuff at home, fine. But when you're talking about on the other side of our border, something that affects us that much, you gotta rise up and come together somehow.
Yeah, and this is a result of a Republican Party that used to be a very foreign policy focused party, but Donald Trump and this sort of new isolationism that he brought in led to a complete abandonment of foreign policy. The State Department is still a year in trying to reach the staffing levels it was at before Donald Trump drained the place of career diplomats and experts. Yeah. We have very little foreign intelligence operation left that is reliable because of budget cuts and how inward the Trump administration was.
Yeah, you're spot on.
This is a problem.
It is. It's exactly where we are, and a lot of this is the fault of the previous administration. Max, I appreciate the time. As always, good talking with you. I'm going to take a quick break right here. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day the first unemployment insurance law was established in the United States. It happened in Wisconsin. Governor Philip La Follette signed the Unemployment Compensation Act. La Follette had a reputation as a progressive leader. Under the new law, employers were required to contribute to a fund based on their payrolls. Many across Wisconsin were out of work due to the Great Depression, but not all workers were covered by the act. Farm workers, domestic workers, railroad workers, teachers, and loggers were among those excluded. Employers with less than 10 workers also did not have to participate. Due to the Great Depression, it took a while to build up enough money in the insurance pool to actually pay out benefits. California, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Utah, and Washington soon followed Wisconsin's lead. Then, in 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law. Part of this act was to encourage states to establish unemployment insurance systems for their workers. The first unemployment insurance benefit check went to Niles Rudd of Madison, Wisconsin on August 17, 1936. He was an out-of-work photo engraver. He received the maximum allowable benefit of $15. Today, unemployment insurance programs remain a federal-state partnership administered under state laws. That means each state has a different maximum dollar amount and length of time the benefits can be used. Recently, unemployment insurance protections have been rolled back in some states. Since 2011, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and North and South Carolina have all cut the amount of time that people can receive unemployment benefits. In North Carolina, that length dropped from 26 weeks down to just 14.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've been waiting all day to talk about this. Evidently, according to Forbes.com, the Secret Service was planted outside of John Bolton's home for the past 2 days. And I guess today people saw, black bags being removed from the property. Not sure why, not sure what it was, not sure why John Bolton is getting Secret Service protection or, someone keeping an eye on him. Not sure what was in the bags. Don't know if it was computers, phones. Don't know. Don't know what operations being run. I'm just saying that, Bolton, who is propping up, hey, let's go get him. Under the Secret Service's watch. I don't know which side that comes in here to share some thoughts on possibly why that could be. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So what's this about? What do you get from this story of the Secret Service watching John Bolton?
Well, I frankly tried today to find out as much as I could because I'm extremely curious, and I'm curious why it's the Secret Service. And, of course, they're monitoring, as the story said, for the past 2 days, the home. Now, you could speculate that it's because of, some type of particular, threat, but I don't know why Secret Service would be used for that. He's not in the White House anymore. He's not in an official capacity of anything.
Or is he? Is that possible? Do you think it's possible that Joe Biden would ask John Bolton for anything, even directions?
Impossible.
Okay.
If Joe Biden has done that and that gets public, I would say that Joe Biden better not run in a Democratic primary.
No, because the Secret Service, that usually comes out of the executive branch, right?
Yes, it does.
So
now, the only thing that Secret Service do remember that Secret Service also is a semi-arm of the Treasury.
What? I wonder what that could bring us.
I mean, I don't know. This one is so baffling because if this was a matter of protection of some type, there's other law enforcement entities that would do this. I just can't figure out the Secret Service angle to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either, and that's where I'm going to come with. I'm going to say I don't know. But if I were doing like Fox News, I would say, is it bags of laundered money? Are someone paying him to get us into a war with Russia and then eventually Iran? Is this John Bolton's way of getting to Iran? But I'm not going to do that.
I mean, I don't get it of exactly why, again, the Secret Service would be utilized to watch it. If they're taking things out of the house, that's a whole different world.
Yeah, they had some black bags, I guess. That's all I heard.
That's a different world.
Yeah. Well,
it could be possible. Let me speculate on this, because it is Secret Service. I mean, it could be possible that he has some type of material that is intelligence sensitive that they wanted to have. I mean, he was the NSA guy, national security. So maybe he had something, and they're making sure that they've gotten all of it.
yeah, well, that could be.
Because I can't, honestly, it's not a protection factor. It can't be. He's not White House personnel.
Well, I hope we find out, and we'll see how this plays out. But I thought of that. I saw that. I thought of you. I know how much of a big fan you are of John Bolton's.
Right. We couldn't stand each other for a long time.
So I had to bring that up. I also wanted to get your thoughts on the January 6th committee subpoenaing some folks over those fake electors. Evidently, we're gonna start bringing some of those folks in who tried to say that they were the real electors in the state. Is that a good thing, or is it about? It's my view. It's about damn time. Why on January 20th of 2021 weren't these people arrested? That's what I want to know.
Well, there's a couple of things that have happened in relationship to the January 6th committee. One was the Justice Department charging people with sedition. That had to happen. If it didn't happen, then it was vandalism of the Capitol, vandalizing federal property. The sedition brings an entirely different complexion to this whole deal, because sedition meant trying to obviously stop an election and pull a coup and overturn a country. So that was the one thing. The second thing is them moving on this is completely appropriate. In fact, I think justice, I would assume, would move on this simultaneously and not leave it up just to the committee of Congress. I would assume justice would move on this. These were put into the archives. Somebody faked them. This wasn't one of those onion stories or a souvenir that somebody wanted to make as a practical joke. This was the falsification of documents that somebody probably intended to try to use.
Yeah. Now there were, as the report came out yesterday, there were some states like here in Pennsylvania where I'm at, where the people who tried this put in writing that in the event that the coup attempt that Trump was trying to pull off, in the event that all of the things on that wish list memo happened, then they would be the electors. So the Attorney General here is saying that's kind of, that language being put in there is kind of a get out of jail free card for them, because they weren't claiming at that moment to be the electors. As were in other states, they took that part out and tried to say that, yes, we are in fact the electors, and those people should be in jail.
Yes, and again, if they did, which I don't know how many states did that beyond your state, but if they did do that and they put in there, in the event that there is an alteration in the Electoral College or some reconsideration, we want to have this officially on record, then you're right. They've got a card to get out of jail. But if they didn't do that and just simply faked electoral votes, then that's a problem, and it's criminal.
Yeah.
So I think that I would assume that the Justice Department should simultaneously go after this with an official investigation, as the January 6th committee is.
I want to see perp. You know me. I want to see perp walks every day. I don't want to see subpoenas. I want to see people in bracelets and in cute jumpsuits, and I want to see them paraded off into the Gray Bar Hotel. This is that serious, and the longer it takes, the longer this drags out, the less urgent it appears, the less severe it appears, and the more that these people are emboldened to try and change the narrative, I'm of the mindset we should be done with this. We should be having hearings and trials and sentencings and all of that stuff, not just for the people who are doing the stuff at the day of the Capitol, but for all of the people all the way up the food chain.
Well, it's sedition, and again, I was pleased that the Justice Department was actually going after that charge.
Yeah.
There was some disappointment in the original charges that were out there as they came through the court system. And the reason I say that, I thought the first couple of people out of the box, forget sedition for a second. Let's say somebody, wasn't directly onto the floor of the House, or they didn't make statements, but they were there doing things in the Capitol. That's just not a matter of vandalism. You'd get a bigger sentence if you hit a federal post office or a federal building. And I felt in the beginning a couple of these people, the first couple out of the box, were getting off so lightly, it had to tell everybody else down the food chain, well, maybe we ought to kind of hold out a little bit. But if you sock the first few of them and really go after them, it has to tell the others that the government's serious about it. So this is a new way they've approached it with the sedition charges that I think will make a difference in the, 700 some people remaining?
Yeah, no, you and I agree 100% on this. And hopefully this moves a lot quicker. Do you think this saves the Democrats in this next election cycle, though? Because I'm looking at this Cook political report, and they're saying, look, 10 months away from election time, all signs are pointing to Democrats getting wiped out. And part of this, I think a part of it is people are frustrated that this has taken so long, and now you got people going, well, it wasn't a big deal. The narrative is changing, and people are onto other things. Do you think any of this stuff coming out eventually matters?
I think some of it will help somewhat. It's just, I think we have to look at the reality. If you put these pieces together, the January 6th committee will help somewhat. A speedy process, a united process by the Democrats on a Supreme Court nominee will help. Having obviously the first African-American female sitting justice when she's confirmed will help. Now, to overbuild this, though, that this solves everything, no, it doesn't. But I can tell you this: if the Democrats aren't united and pull the whole process, the trigger on it fast, it hurts. And I'm relating this to the January 6th committee, and I've said this on your show before, Rick. What on earth took so long? Of course, I served in Congress. Congress can't draw water, out of a spigot, but unless it's an 8-day process, So I think that the committee isn't lost, and the efforts of the committee are not particularly lost, but I believe that this happening a year later, for whatever reason, and maybe it's not their fault, maybe there's a whole bureaucratic process, but I think some of the bang for the buck got delayed. And if it goes on through the summer with some live hearings, I'm just not so sure that it won't be tuned out. I think now is the time for the iron to strike hot to bring out any points or anything they know that is out there that really makes people say, wow, did that really take place? I think now is the time to
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. If you're just tuning in, make sure you grab the podcast. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can do that at thericksmithshow.com. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. I'm looking at the subpoenas came out today, the January 6th committee, and one of the White House spokespeople, this Judd Deere, someone who they're saying, hey, we want to know what happened in that staff meeting in the Oval Office on January 5th. This is a guy who could give some insight. What do you think? What do you think could come out of this?
Well, Judd Deere is a political advisor, and he served as deputy assistant, to the president of the United States, and I think he was the deputy press secretary.
Right.
And so he's in what I would call, obviously a key position. He was around and, was part of conversation. So I think that questioning him is going to be appropriate. They're probably going to get easier time of getting questions from him than they would one of the Trump children.
Yeah, no, because at the end of this, these are the people that you need to be questioning, and you should have already, because I want to know what happened, in the run up to this. I actually want to know what happened, and we do know, but I want someone on the record saying, as people are rioting, as they're flying the Confederate flag through our Capitol, this is what Donald Trump was doing, and we know that from one of his press secretaries that he was. I think it was Stephanie Grisham who said, he was gleeful, he was happy. Look at what my people are doing for me, and I think that has to be hammered home over and over again.
Right, and with the case of Judd Deere, I think that the knowledge that he has, supposedly, has a lot of firsthand knowledge of the president, his demeanor, his behavior, pre-hit to the Capitol and post, and he was, I believe, supposedly right there during the whole process. So I think he is going to be key, and of course they can build on that, because if they bring him in, they can also ask, who else was around at that point in time. So I think they're wanting Deere in particular because Deere himself, according to what I read, they said he met and communicated, I think, with a lot of officials, and that was after he formulated the White House's response to the attack, because he's the one that did that. So he obviously talked to a lot of people saying, well, how do we answer this? What do you think about that? Who was really doing this? That's what he was doing. He formulated the response.
Yep. Last question I got for you, real quick. I'm looking at what's going on over with Ukraine, and
Yes.
I got a bunch of emails today. We got to impeach Joe Biden over his phone call with the Ukrainian president, and I'm going, really? We're going to go down this path?
A friend of mine called me today. They call and they say, well, they're going to impeach him, and I said, for what? No, they're not. No, they aren't. I said, number one, they aren't. Number two, it's democratically controlled, so it's not going to happen. It's not an impeachable offense. But I believe that the White House really, when do we ever learn? They need to be very cautious, because we now are out there more concerned, more active, more vocal than the Ukraine is. And I'm looking at this, and 1 and 1's not coming up to 2. I know the president's being pushed from a lot of people. But as far as a phone call where the president, says, I want to help you, and I think part of it, although the president of Ukraine may have said to the president, kind of down low this thing, but there was nothing there that the president said, no, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. It was two leaders. We know they had a conversation about the current situation and some of the support we could give the Ukraine.
Yeah, and what Biden didn't
nothing
do?
There. Now, I think overall the whole thing is dangerous in the sense that we can't get more out front than the Ukraine is. I think that's a problem.
No,
we
I
can't
agree.
be more hawkish than they are towards Russia.
No, I agree. But what he didn't do, he didn't ask for any quid pro quo. He didn't ask for anything back.
No, there was not.
There is that. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the time. Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, look, at the end of this, he's not wrong. I don't want to get too far out in front of this either, because I don't want shots being fired at our soldiers. That's simple. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is the Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. The only people whose names are recorded in history are those who have done something. The peaceful and indifferent are forgotten. They never know the fighting joy of living. Those words were spoken in Seattle by Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. Flynn certainly embraced the fighting joy of living as a leader in the industrial workers of the world. She became a full-time organizer for the IWW in 1907. She traveled the country organizing workers from Pennsylvania to Montana, from New Jersey to Massachusetts, Minnesota to Washington. In 1920, she was a founding member of the American Civil Liberties Union. During World War II, Flynn fought for equal pay for women. During her career, Flynn was arrested 10 times for her organizing activities. In 1951, she was sent to prison for 2 years for alleged activities subversive to the United States government. A tireless fighter for workers' and women's rights, Flynn became the chairwoman of the U.S. Communist Party in 1961. She died while on a visit to the Soviet Union in 1964. And in her honor, fellow labor activist Joe Hill wrote this song, Rebel Girl.
Yes, her hands may be hardened from labor, and her dress may not be very fine, but a heart in her bosom is beating that is true to her class and her kind. And the grafters in terror are trembling when her spite and defiance she'll hurl for the only and thoroughbred.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in
2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, a question, comment, something on your mind, we love to hear it. Looking at James Carville, I've never really been a huge James Carville fan. I think he's right. The economy's stupid, and I've that's my political philosophy for the most part. How do we make people's lives better first, foremost? How do we get equal pay for everyone? How do we close the inequality gap? How do we make sure that there's opportunity for the future? How do we make lives better? And we start by making sure that there's a roof over their head, food on the table, clothes on their back, all of those things. We go there first. So I'm right in line with it's the economy, stupid, and I think the Democratic Party has to be their wheelhouse. It's been a long time since they have been the party and the champion of the working class, and they need to grab some of that back. And I do think it was interesting that Carville, being interviewed by Vox, said something that a lot of us have been thinking over the years. I've often wondered why we throw so much money politically at candidates. This is one of those things that's been frustrating as an observer and someone who wants the Democratic Party to get back to their ideals of being the party of the working class and of making lives better. They raise all this money and they spend it on candidates. And the first thing candidates do is they go run out and they spend it on television ads. So we're making Comcast, huge amounts of money. We're making the big conglomerate networks, just wealthy beyond. So Carville in this interview says, something I've thought 1,000 times. He says, just look at how Democrats organize and spend money. For Christ's sake, he says, Jamie Harrison raised over $100 million only to lose his Senate race to Lindsey Graham by 10 points. Amy McGrath runs for Senate in Kentucky, raises over $90 million and gets crushed by Mitch McConnell. He said all those races were going to lose, but Democrats keep doing stupid stuff. He used a different word. They're too damn emotional. Democrats obsess over high-profile races. They can't win because that's where all the attention is. We're addicted to hopeless causes, and that is spot on accurate. I said this in the last election when you're looking at those two candidates to take out Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, which you were never going to beat. It's called math. It's almost impossible to overcome the math. But they spent $190 million that could have been spent on 100 190, 200 different House races across this country. 1,000 state legislature seats. It could have been spent in so much better ways to build an infrastructure, much like the Republicans have done. Democrats usually outspend Republicans in big elections. Instead, where Republicans are masterful, and this is where I keep telling people, look at the infrastructure that the Republicans have built. Look at what the corporate class has built for the Republican Party. Look at the infrastructure that a Republican candidate gets that a Democrat does not. Talk radio being the biggest value of all of them. Because, if you're a Democrat, I got to buy an ad on a station. It's going to cost you $200 an ad. You get your minute, you get your 30 seconds, and bang, there it is. So you put your ad in there, and then the Republican comes on and talks for 15 minutes for free. Because they've built the infrastructure. And this is where Democrats have got to wake up to reality. There are some races you're not going to win. In Kentucky and in South Carolina, those are two of them. Compete, but $190 million between the two of them, while races that you could have won, that you could have been much more competitive in, I don't know, Senate races in a number of Western states with the right candidate, you could have actually turned control, but lost causes, hopeless causes. He's not wrong. And this is where we as Democrats and people who are look, I'm a Democrat because I got nowhere else to go. The Republicans want to stab me in the back at every turn. And maybe that changes someday. Maybe the crazy stops. But this is where we are in this moment. I want the Democrats to be much more focused on working class issues. This is how we move the country forward. But in spending the resources that they have in the way that they are, of course they're getting beaten in these places. And this next election cycle, and I'm being told, I speak to people at the DNC, and they tell me that they're trying. They're allocating more resources into more rural areas because they haven't competed there forever. And maybe there's a chance to take a working class message into those places, which I think has to happen. Because this is a moment. We're in an interesting time. This is a moment where Republicans are really caught with their pants down. They have no core ideology. They have no belief structure. There's nothing there. All we're getting is outrage. It's all against Joe Biden. And even when they had control, I mean, stop and think about the Trump years. What did they do when they had the levers of power? What policies did they move forward on? What were the actions that they actually did? Tax cuts for the rich. That was their legislative accomplishment. That was it. They handed a boatload of money to rich people. Working people got a little something, a little taste, but it dwindled over time until eventually it goes away. It sunsets. I love that word. It sunsets. It's not like we took it away from you. No, it just sunsets. Which is crazy, but hey, you got to love soft language. We got robbed. A billionaire got more. I get to pay it back. Same thing with this child tax credit money. For a lot of people, they got it, and they're going to have to pay it back at tax time. But you know what that tax money did? You know what that check did every month? It gave some certainty to families to make sure that they got food on the table. Cut poverty by almost half. And yet, Manchin and Sinema can't have that. Now, I do find it interesting that Carville did bring up the senator from West Virginia. And he's not wrong here either. He said, look, the tax credit is great. It's extraordinary. We did great stuff. It's unbelievable. He said, I just keep trying to win elections because this is enormously successful, but I'll just keep saying, if we don't have Senator Manchin, we're going to have somebody really, really, really extreme in that seat. Again, he's not wrong, which is why I haven't called for, we're going to primary Joe Manchin, we're going to go get him. You're not. And he knows that. This is where you have to get on the ground. This is where you have to be in these communities. And this is where I am imploring Democrats. Take that $190 million in celebrity campaigns and spend that in local communities to build local infrastructure, to put people on the ground, neighbors on the ground. Don't fly in and drop people in like they did, like Obama did in 12 with his Obama for America or Organizing for America, where they send in a whole bunch of kids from all around the country. They dropped them in, and then as soon as the election was over, they were gone. Local people, building local infrastructure, talking about local issues. This is where Democrats need to get back to the grassroots. Now, I know they know that because I've told them. It's important that the rest of us tell them. Because here we're in this weird world. The redistricting that's going on is just another example of how our system is broken. Axios today pointed out that there are 19 districts in 12 states that are either plus 15R or plus 15D. That means that if it's a plus 15R, there is not a chance, and you know where, that a Democrat's going to win. And if it's a plus 15D, there's not a chance of a Republican winning. And we don't want those kind of seats. I don't want, let me put it this way, I don't want those kind of seats. I don't want uncompetitive seats. I want seats where we're competing on ideas. We're fighting on, hey, how are we going to bring policy to make people's lives better? Not on which caricature of insanity we can put into that place, which extremist we can throw in there, which kind of Marjorie Trader Greene or Lauren Boebert or Madison Cawthorn or Matt Gaetz or the screwy guy from Texas. I don't want that. I want people who are worried every election cycle about, I better do the right thing. I better bring home the bacon. I better make sure the roads are paved, the bridges don't fall down, people got jobs. I point to that place in Ohio, down Middletown, maybe, I think it was Ohio, where a person calls his state rep and goes, hey, I'm losing my job. Community's falling apart. What are you doing to help our community, get back to where we were? The representative told him, move. You go, whoa. Your job is to make things better. That's your job. Your job isn't to go, move. You don't like it, move. But that's what happens in a plus 15 district. They're not responsive to we the people. They don't care about us then. All they care about then is raising money. All they care about then is getting on the Fox News or the OANs or the Newsmaxes to make their little star rise. Getting on the Twitters and saying dumb stuff. Which is why we don't get anything done. Which is why our roads and bridges are in bad shape. Which is why we're grateful for a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Which, thank goodness for the Democrats and Joe Biden. We got that. It's not what we need. We need a whole lot more. But again, don't have the people who are going to say, we need a lot more. When the American Society of Civil Engineers says, no. Back in 2020, we needed $3.6 trillion years ago. And we're still not there. There's a problem. Chicago, Minneapolis, there's a problem. The problem is we need more investment. And how do we get that? Well, we need to make sure that we're holding people accountable. And we're moving policy that is taking us in the right direction. And the thing that gets me is, look, when somebody's not afraid that they're going to lose, they can be nuts. I look at Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is nuts. Ted Cruz doesn't think he can lose in Texas, which is why, as David Korn pointed out over at Mother Jones. And I got this email, and I remember going, geez, crazy. Cruz sent out a fundraising email, embracing this right-wing crackpot conspiracy theory that, the FBI, they were the ones behind January 6th. It was the FBI that did it. Send me money because I brought up Ray Epps' name. It was all orchestrated by the government. And then you get on Fox, and then you get on the right-wing bloviate outrage candy machine. And now he's king. I look at somebody like Cruz and I go, you're soulless. I would never vote for you. You have no courage. You have no core conviction. You have no values. But, this is where we end up being. So I'm in this weird spot because we have so much that has to be done, that I don't want to see these kind of extreme districts, because we've got stuff to get done. And it's not. That's the frustrating part. And the Senate is the place where all progress goes to die. If we do get something through the Senate or through the House, it's probably going to die in the Senate. And this is where, Democrats spending that money in some Western states on potential races to change some of that. Because understand, Democratic values play out West too. Now, what Republicans have been able to do is paint the Democratic Party as, this extreme, the transgender party, all of these extreme things to divide people. And my position's always been, I don't care what people do in the confines of their four walls. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You follow your dreams, buddy. You follow your dreams. You go as far as you can go. But Republicans have done just an incredible job of scaring us. And I'm hoping that changes. And this is where this election cycle is that important. It is that important. Real quick story. Evidently, yesterday, a federal judge invalidated what they're calling the largest offshore oil and gas lease sale in the country's history. And the headline, and this is where I love headlines. The headline is, Judge throws out Biden administration's massive Gulf of Mexico oil and gas leaks. And I remember when I first heard about this, I got a bunch of calls on our Saturday show, people going, I can't believe Joe Biden just, sold those leases. He said he was going to not do this, and, we're going to drill more. And I'm going, no. He didn't have a choice. The court made him go forward on this. They're going to try and stop it. They're going to try and, in the courts, fight down the road. When you read the article, and this is where the Washington Post just put out this pretzel twist of a story. The Biden administration did sell it. They did get some money for it. Didn't really mention until way later in the story that this was a court decision that they had to do it. But that then they went and it was appealed, and it was appealed by a whole bunch of environmental groups that, basically beat the administration to the lawsuit. And they were filing it too. And this was those lawsuits getting this thrown out. But the story made it sound like, this is Biden sold all this stuff. He didn't want to, had to. And now this is being stopped because it didn't meet the environmental review process. And people are happy. This is a good thing. But the headline, and this is where, again, we got to read more than just the headline, more than just the 200 plus characters on Twitter. It's more than the headline. We'll see where this goes, though. I got a lot to get to. If you missed any of the program, download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Carmelita Torres led the bath riots at the El Paso-Juarez border. Mexican workers traveled daily across the Santa Fe Bridge from Juarez, Mexico, into El Paso, Texas for work. As a condition of entry, workers were required to strip naked and be sprayed with a toxic mixture of chemicals. U.S. health officials insisted they were trying to stop the spread of typhus through this type of delousing campaign. However, they were just as motivated by racist typecasting of Mexicans as dirty. David Dorado Romo, author of Ringside to a Revolution, tells the story of 17-year-old Carmelita Torres. Amid rumors that health workers secretly photographed and then distributed photos of the naked women as they were being sprayed, Carmelita crossed into El Paso every day where she worked as a maid. But on this day, instead of stripping down, she refused fumigation and convinced the other women to demonstrate with her against this humiliating daily procedure. Within an hour, she and 200 other women had blocked all traffic coming into El Paso. Newspaper reports claimed several thousand protesters by the end of the day. The women marched to the disinfection camp, hoping to convince those undergoing disinfection to join them. When health officials tried to disperse the crowd, they were met with rocks and bottles. The women then laid down on the trolley tracks to stop the delivery of more workers and wrestled with motormen for control of the cars. The riots lasted for 3 days, but the spraying of Mexican workers with DDT and other toxic chemicals continued for more than 40 years.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
So some good news coming out of D.C. Starting next week, you're going to have federal contractors. Almost 400,000 federal contractors are going to get a boost in their paychecks because of the Biden administration's policy that no federal contractor is going to be paying under $15 an hour. This is the kind of stuff we need to have. We need to have policy. We need to have initiative. We need to have executive orders if we must to raise wages, hours, conditions. But for me, the good old-fashioned way of joining, forming unions, collective bargaining, hammering out something at the table, that's where my mind goes. And as we talked about the other day, California is trying something. I don't know if it's different, but they're trying to get fast food workers a bump up as well. And there's a piece of legislation banging around in their General Assembly that would help raise the floor for fast food workers. The bill is called the Fast Food Accountability and Standards Recovery Act, Fast Recovery Act for short. And what this would do is it would raise up the bottom and make, people compete on quality, on service, not on who's willing to slit each other's throats for pennies. And here to share some thoughts on, what this could be, what it is, and why it is, I've asked Bobbi Murray to come talk with us. Bobbi is a reporter over at Capital in Maine. She's got a new piece out on this topic. Bobbi, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. And I hope I can sometime write a line about not slitting each other's throats for profits. So anyway, thank you, sir.
Okay, good. No, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I think is important. We need policy that's going to help raise the floor. I'm all in favor of competition. I'm all in favor of duking it out, but on the right things, not on how many families can go without health insurance, not on how families can go without food on the table. We just saw during the Kroger strike that a large percentage, like 3/4 of the people who work in a food place are food insecure. That's insane to me. And yet we need policy that's going to lift this up. And that's what attracted me to this article that you have written over at Capital in Maine to help us learn a little bit about this Fast Recovery Act. Can you share a little bit about what this is thus far?
Well, I think you just hit it when you said, lifting the floor. So what's happening in California with this FAST Act is that it would set up a food standards council that includes the franchisors. Everybody stay awake. The franchisors are like McDonald's and Jack in the Box. The franchisees are the mom and pops that have to put a big bank to become franchisees, and other persons, but also bring fast food workers to the table. So then it would set up standards. The legislature approves them, and so it's a whole sectoral shift whereby in one of the biggest states in the nation, I think maybe the biggest, where a whole bunch of people get a seat at the table, including the workers,
Right.
to set new standards.
And this is how it's done in a lot of European countries. I mean, Germany does some of this. Other countries do this,
True.
where it's industry wide. It's not here in this country. We go shop by shop. We're seeing this at the Starbucks places. You know, there are a number of Starbucks now saying we're going to organize individual stores, whereas this would. And this is what I tweeted out today to Starbucks. If you were smart, if you were the model employer that you claim you want to be, you would negotiate with all of your stores. You would raise the standards for everyone, and you would have a national agreement for every Starbucks worker, so that there's a
Correct.
floor under their feet. And this way, you would have some certainty and also a lot of really goodwill, but more the certainty for the industry. And this is where I think it's important that we maybe change our way of thinking a little bit in this country, away from individual collective bargaining agreements to much more bigger national agreements, like where I worked in the National Master Freight Agreement for decades.
No, that is a perfect point, because especially since the unionization level has dropped so low. I mean, since the 50s, when unions were able to set some terms, it's really important to figure out other venues by which to raise the standards.
Right.
Right.
And this doesn't mean the unions are done. This would mean potentially you could
not
have
at
unions
all.
sitting at the table.
Yeah, no, and not at all. I mean, it's just, I think you just pointed it out. It's another tactic or another strategy. And, you know, I interviewed somebody who said, you know, you are, there's organizing McDonald's by McDonald's, and they're not winning. They're striking, but they're not winning
Right.
wage hikes.
Well,
But-
because there are so many of them, there are so many
Right.
places, and you're never going to have the resources to be able to bring them all in. This is where
Well,
you
that's
need
right.
legislation. You need
That's right.
a government body to say, look, we're across the industry. This is what we're doing, and this is kind of what the minimum wage was supposed to do.
Exactly.
But
So.
over 12 years, we haven't raised the minimum wage. This is what regulatory standards are supposed to do. And what we've seen over the last 4 decades is an all-out assault by Republicans on anything having to do with regulations. So for this, I see this as an opportunity to re-regulate the workspace and make it better for people on the job.
Well, and that is true. And, the 5 for 15 campaign, I have to say, has resulted, and for the folks at home, that has raised wages at fast food places all over the place. It's like it's been pushed by McDonald's workers striking, and then so you make enough noise, and then they have to change the legislation in the state or create minimum wage standards in the town, and that's how it gets done. I mean, collective bargaining, I think you brought this up earlier, but collective bargaining is, I mean, that's one tool in the toolbox, right? But what you're saying, and what I think we're saying, is that you have to change the landscape. And so, Fast Food Recovery Act, FAST Act, it's called, in California, has really potential to ripple out because it takes into account the power of the franchisors, and the franchisors are like McDonald's and Jack in the Box. They're the big, kahunas who sell.
Yeah, they sell mom and they sell other people. They sell them the name.
Thank
You buy the
Yes,
materials, you
that's
buy
right.
the food, you buy all that stuff.
And you-
This is how McDonald's and Wendy's and all of these people have gotten away
All of
with
them
all of these
work that
labor
way.
violations and all of this stuff. They say it's not us. It's them. And this is where the joint employer rule that during the Obama years was so important. That McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King and the rest of them, they have to bear some responsibility in this. And if that's not going to happen, I see this as the alternative.
Well, you're correct, and I am going to look back at my article here. That the franchisees have to pony up as much as $500,000 in liquid assets, or demonstrate that, and then 2 million plus in investment. So then they get to own the name. So that creates a squeeze because they are fronting all the money, right? And McDonald's owns the. Are we going to get sued for saying owns the name, and so therefore the franchisees have to be cutting corners wherever they can, and that's the thing that weighs down on the workers. So therefore, you do want to be able to set, as you're saying, larger standards so that the franchisees don't get squeezed, the workers don't get crushed, and the franchisors, who are among the wealthiest corporations in the world, have to show up at the table too with all these parties I just mentioned,
right,
and be accountable.
No, and it's perfectly reasonable, something we most certainly should do. So what are the chances of this actually passing? What are the chances of this becoming law in California?
Well, sir, it is going to the floor of the assembly on Monday, and it missed by 3 votes in June, I think, but it looks like, so the author, Chris Holden, assembly member, kind of went back around and gathered in, I think, other assembly members and spoke to their concerns. So it looks good. It only missed by 3 votes, 6 months ago or whatever it was. But so they're feeling pretty good about it.
No, that's a good thing. So how can we help move this along? Because, I look at this, and this is one of those moments where, it needs a little push, needs a little support from behind. What's the response here?
My goodness, I am not quite sure. Yeah, it's since it's a legislative thing, well, let me tell you this. The person who was carrying it through the legislature is Chris Holden. So but he's the assembly member. You can send him an attaboy.
That's it. We can tweet at him. We can yell at him. Do more. I got it. You're listening to
You can tweet or yell at him.
That's it.
He was a franchisee himself in Pasadena for a couple of years, and he said, "Oh man, that's the hardest work I ever did," because he was a Subway franchisee.
Oh,
and
they're everywhere.
And I know, and like as consumers, we're like happy, but as a franchisee, it's kind of difficult. So anyway, but yeah, tweet and yell at the California legislature. Yeah, send Holden an attaboy.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Bobbi Murray. She's a journalist over at Capital in Maine. Her most recent piece, Will California Supersize the Bargaining Power of Fast Food Workers? We'll get links up at social media how you can take a look at that article. Now, what are the arguments against this? I'm sure that the franchisors are saying, hey, we've stuck our life savings into this. We want to squeeze everything we can out of it.
Okay, not to get in your grill here, but if the franchisees are the people who have to pony up all the dough.
Right. Okay,
I know. No, it took me hours to figure this out, so sorry. But anyway, so what was your question?
What's the argument against it? It seems like common sense to me. If I'm going to compete with you, I'm going to want to compete on good things. I'm going to believe in my product. I'm going to say I got the best, burger, the best fries, the best staff. We're going to provide the best service so people are going to come to it. I don't want to compete on making my workers poor. I don't want to compete on having to look at the people who work for me and know that a large percentage of them are homeless, knowing a large percent of them have children at their home that are hungry. I'm going to want to compete on better levels. And so the question is, how do I get there? And if I'm the franchise or ease, right, the individuals who own it, I'm going to want something from the big boys to help make sure that that's a level playing field.
I think that's the idea behind this legislation, this foods council that the legislation establishes, which is you get them all at the table. But you're right. I mean, the franchisees who pony up all the dough up front, and then they have to figure out how to manage these places month to month, which, by the way, in California, the average wage for the fast food worker is $26,000 a year, and they're mostly women of color, so there you have it. And what the franchisees get into the position of doing is cutting corners constantly. And, McDonald's is not losing any money. They're fine. But
no, they make billions in profit every year.
Yes, they do. And I think the CEO got a $50 million payoff last year. I can't remember. But, the people at your Subway that we love, they're cutting people's hours one worker I interviewed who works at a McDonald's, and then she was out with COVID, thank you, and then came back in, and she says that the workforce is cut in half. And part is because people are out on COVID leave or they're sick and they can't come to work.
Right.
And the other part of it is the McDonald's is like cutting back. So she was saying two people are doing the job of one.
No, and for me, the idea of having this kind of council, and the more we're talking about, the more I'm liking the idea of bringing all the stakeholders in place and holding some of them accountable. And there's part of me, you brought up Subway. Subway, you probably wouldn't know it, but Subway has the most franchisees of any of these fast food places across the country. There are more Subways than any other fast food place because they're relatively cheap to put up and they're relatively easy to go through the process. The problem is you got a bunch of people who put their last $20 into it, figuring, hey, I'll be able to cheat the workforce and make my money back. And this is where we've got to stop this kind of low road franchising that happens, where we put people in these situations where, hey, I'm going to make money off of this, but they're going into it thinking, hey, I'm going to be able to cheat people out of their wages. That has to stop. Which is why I think this is not a bad idea.
Well, it is called the Fast Food Accountability and Standards Act.
There you go.
And so so that's the deal. It sets up a council that would set the standards, and it puts everybody at the table. But like I say, two workers at least, which I think is kind of a first. Fast food workers at the table. To set up
sounds
standards.
Mighty German to me, because the German works councils have people on their board, have workers on the boards.
Well, it sounds pretty Californian to me.
Okay.
But anyway, that's how we're doing it out here.
There you go.
I get your point. I agree. It's like, and I think what I didn't say successfully is what's been happening across the country in labor is all these local efforts that push the city council, push the state, push for larger standards.
Yep.
So, it's done by worker pressure too, right?
There you go. Bobbi, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Hope people will take a look at the article. Will California supersize the bargaining power of fast food workers over at Capitol in Maine? Bobbi Murray, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk. I'm Rick Smith,
And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day the first unemployment insurance law was established in the United States. It happened in Wisconsin. Governor Philip La Follette signed the Unemployment Compensation Act. La Follette had a reputation as a progressive leader. Under the new law, employers were required to contribute to a fund based on their payrolls. Many across Wisconsin were out of work due to the Great Depression, but not all workers were covered by the act. Farm workers, domestic workers, railroad workers, teachers, and loggers were among those excluded. Employers with less than 10 workers also did not have to participate. Due to the Great Depression, it took a while to build up enough money in the insurance pool to actually pay out benefits. California, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Utah, and Washington soon followed Wisconsin's lead. Then, in 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law. Part of this act was to encourage states to establish unemployment insurance systems for their workers. The first unemployment insurance benefit check went to Niles Rudd of Madison, Wisconsin on August 17, 1936. He was an out-of-work photo engraver. He received the maximum allowable benefit of $15. Today, unemployment insurance programs remain a federal-state partnership administered under state laws. That means each state has a different maximum dollar amount and length of time the benefits can be used. Recently, unemployment insurance protections have been rolled back in some states. Since 2011, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and North and South Carolina have all cut the amount of time that people can receive unemployment benefits. In North Carolina, that length dropped from 26 weeks down to just 14.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I love the story over at More Perfect Union. They've got a Jimmy John's sign where the Jimmy John's people are saying, hey, we're closed because, well, we're having a labor shortage. Hey, we'd really like to have you come back, but we're having a labor shortage. And the workers, put up a sign and say, no, it's not a labor shortage. It said, you've treated like crap for so long, we're no longer willing to put up with it. And I said, this is what unions do. The boss puts some nonsense out there, and the unions counter it with fact and information. And hopefully we learn this lesson, and hopefully they learn the lesson. Hopefully they turn around, and like we talked about in the last segment, maybe we do see industry-wide standards to make, competition on good things like quality and service instead of who's willing to have their workforce be hungry and homeless. Just seems like an interesting way to go. And here to talk a little bit about last week, you may remember us talking about this company, Cemex, their workers staged this practice strike, which I love. I love the idea of practice strikes. Kind of gives the boss a little taste of what's coming if they don't come back to the table. And these workers have been fighting for over 3 years. Again, to highlight just how broken our labor laws are in this country. The story began back in 2018 when these Cemex workers in Las Vegas and in Southern California, I believe, decided, had enough, we've done it. All the harassment, all the intimidation. And here we are years later, companies spent $1 million on union busters and NLRB decisions saying that the company broke tons of laws. Still no contract, and the workers ready to hit the streets. That's why I've asked Diana Ornelas to come talk with us. She's a Teamster organizer and former Cemex driver, one who was fired for what? The audacity of saying, I would like representation, please. And also Eric Najolla, he is a Cemex driver currently. Guys, thanks for taking time for me. Diana, let's start with you. I'm looking at this story, 3 years plus into this, fired for the audacity of organizing. Walk me through what happened to you, what your story is, and how the NLRB came around to decide that you were wrongfully terminated.
Thank you. Yes. So when I started, I actually had 3 jobs at the time. I quit because I wanted to find one place to call home. And I thought that was going to be at Cemex. And when I started there, unbeknownst to me, my coworkers were already in the progress of organizing. So I was approached and invited to my first meeting. When I learned what it was about, I said, okay, I'm with this, let's do it. Especially when I got to learn more about what the nature of the job entails, I was like, wow, this is very dangerous. Like, we definitely deserve more. It's a very risky job. And so as we went through the motion, I became a local union supporter. I also was, I was translating a lot for my coworkers who are bilingual, Spanish speakers. And, the company, I think they just, even the vice president came out and said that he saw a video of me on the Teamsters Ready Mix Facebook page. So they were well aware that I was a vocal union supporter. And, when they fired me, it was because, reasons they said that it was my error. But, as the trial unveiled, we all found out that, they were basically taking any infraction they could on me and reporting it. And they were violating my rights. They were targeting me because I was involved in union activities. So,
and we hear a lot of this, don't we? This happens way too often, and the fines and the penalties and the accountability just isn't there. And I highlight this, your story especially, because again, it shows in this moment why we need something like the PRO Act, which would increase penalties on companies like this. But I'm looking at the company that you work for. They've reportedly spent over $1 million denying you guys the right to a decent wage, to some bit of sanity. And yet that's probably more money they just spent in 10 contracts, but it was about their power against yours, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That's definitely what it comes down to, is the power.
So Eric, let me ask you. You're obviously still working here, and this is obviously somewhere that you support your family with. What is it that's brought you into this? Why do you think this moment is important for representation?
Well, it's in Southern California, it's been a history of not treating drivers fairly. We need representation, especially with a company like CEMEX, mainly because we don't have a voice in the room. We don't have a voice on the job. Zero. We have nothing to go off of. Their policies change from year to year. Their opportunity to make a living wage, a livable wage, it just kind of depends on who they want to work longer, who's their favorites. We need something in writing. We need a Teamsters contract.
Right.
To have a secure wage and secure.
I'm somebody who's been in the trucking industry more than 30 years, and one of the things I say all the time, and I don't know if you can say this with me, I've never been cheated out of a dime. I've gotten every dime that I've ever been entitled to, and I've never taken an unsafe vehicle on the road. Because I've always had the empowerment to say I'm not taking something that's dangerous on the road. To me, those are the first two most important things, and then all of the rest of it comes along. And I don't know many drivers who have the ability to say that. Can you come there with me?
Yeah. I mean, the safety protocols are pretty stringent at CEMEX. There's no doubt about that. But the way it's kind of a dynamic industry where it's all about seniority. The senior guys get more hours. We get the more favorable hours. But when we started this whole actions movement, we were not being treated right. And in addition to, they were sending drivers home and they wanted to stay, and a number of other things, other issues came up. Especially, when you got the balance of the state of California, they're Teamsters with CEMEX, and the grass is greener on the other side. Believe me, I have looked into some of those contracts, and why aren't we having this? We do the same job. We work our tails off the same way they do up north. Why are we not receiving this same benefit as they do the balance of the state?
So for you, it's a dignity and respect thing as well. Let me go back to you, Diana. In looking at this, and I always ask people, what is it that made you first decide?
Mostly for a voice in the room. Yeah.
So Diana, to throw this back to you, what is it that drew you to this?
Once I saw the resistance from them, that's what really just fired me up. At first I wanted to just support my coworkers. From the first initial meeting, I said, okay, let's do this. I'm going to support you guys. This is a good thing. But once I went to my first captive audience meeting and those busters walked in on us and I saw the resistance from the VP of the company, I said, okay, it's on now.
Wow, walk me through what that's like. I mean, I just saw this story from the Starbucks workers are saying we don't want to hear it anymore. We're not participating. What is it like to be in one of those meetings where the boss says you've got to sit down here and you've got to listen to what we say and you don't have a choice? What is that like?
Oh yeah, so they're mandatory meetings. They try to say that they're safety meetings, and maybe the first 5 minutes is, and then after it's a 30-minute session of just pounding you and putting propaganda down your throat, giving you pamphlets and making you watch PowerPoints and having the busters come in and just tell you all these manipulative facts, so-called facts about the union, saying that they're there to be neutral, when in reality they're not. They're there to disperse the support, to cause fear amongst the workers and doubt. And, when you're there, especially, I really want to emphasize this. When you are a Spanish speaker, like many of my coworkers are, it's very difficult to push back on them. They make it very difficult. So, that's why I became very vocal as well. I was kind of that middle piece right there where I spoke up for the people who couldn't. And yeah, they don't allow you to ask questions. They get angry. It's a lot of misinformation that they push.
Let me ask you, Eric. Let's go back to you. And now you had to sit through some of these meetings. What was that like for you?
I was only invited to one meeting, Rick. They kept me away from them. And it was the initial meeting, the very first day that we met, the very first union buster. In fact, I testified in this last trial of the fact that I was isolated. I was not allowed. I was one of the few.
So now this is the other tactic then. Obviously Diana was fired because she was outspoken and they identified her, and the idea being to send a chilling effect across the workforce so that they vote against it because, hey, don't want it to be me. So with you, they knew that they probably weren't going to be able to get rid of you. They probably weren't going to be able to intimidate you. So they ostracized you. Is that what I'm getting?
He was exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I was sent to quarries far away, and I sat 10 hours a day doing nothing, not hauling a load. Meanwhile, they were having union busting meetings and trying to spread their rhetoric on my fellow coworkers. It didn't work on them at the time. Not in Ventura County. It won't work with me. So I believe that's why they ostracized me.
That's good to hear. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Diana Ornelas. She's a Teamster organizer, former Cemex driver who was fired illegally, according to the NLRB. That is now the ruling. And Cemex driver Eric Najolla, he is currently a member fighting. So let me ask you this: you had the big practice strike. What's come out of that? What kind of response did you get from the company? Is this helping move you forward, or are we looking possibly down the road to potentially an actual strike? Let's go with you, Eric. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is what it is. It is just a practice strike. I don't want to speak too much about it. It's a practice strike. Teamsters are behind us 100%. The coworkers behind me 100%, and that's what it is. Just a practice strike for now.
The key being for now. Diana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't want to disclose too much, but it definitely is something that's coming in the future.
Now, as I say about every strike, and I have myself, I've been on strike once back in '94 when the freight contract, when we struck then to save, to save working class jobs and not allow dock workers to be part-time. Nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wants that. I've never met a worker who's excited about the idea of going on strike. And I can't imagine you guys are all that excited either. But it is the last arrow in the quiver because at some point, the only power working people have is the power to fold their arms and march their feet. So I'm curious, do you think this is going to help? Did you get much community support? Where's the workforce in this moment, do you think? And I know you don't want to give away too much internal stuff, but this has got to be moving in a direction. Where do you see it? Diana, let's start with you.
it's definitely moving. We definitely do have community support and, of course, support from other locals. And like I said, I do not wish to disclose too much, but it's going to happen.
Eric, how can we help? How can our listeners help? How can folks who may want to get involved? How can they help?
Go to Ready Mix Teamsters Facebook page. I recommend they support us in that way. Like you said, you've already announced it's been almost 3.5 years we're fighting for a Teamsters contract. And right now, in this particular case, we're fighting against a company who violated our federally protected rights to unionize. Give us support in that way, publicly and Facebook. Contact the Teamsters anytime. Yeah, we would like the support.
Good stuff, guys. I appreciate the time. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in all of this. If there's anything we can do to help, by all means, let me know. Give us a yell. We're happy to have you come back on and share some thoughts. Again, best of luck. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let me know how you see this. But we hear these stories so often, and this is the sad reality in the moment that we're in this country. This is 3.5 years in the making. These folks have been fighting just for the simple dignity and respect of, saying, I want things written down. I want the transparency of a contract. I want to be able to have seniority rights. I want to be able to have some certainty rights. That's not too much to ask. And yet this company spent over $1 million. Stop and think about that for a minute. They spent over $1 million to deny these workers just that. And you go, what if you would have just put that money into the wages, hours, conditions, and whatever was needed? What if you would just spent it in a more positive way and built a happier workforce? And the fact that Diana was fired, is one of those things where you go, this happens way too often. These companies get away with this way too often. And the penalty is always the same. Slap on the wrist, don't do it again. Oh, I'm sorry. Won't do it again till next time. And the next time and the next time. And that's what keeps happening. It keeps happening next time and next time. Which is why we need major comprehensive labor law reform in this country. Without question. And look, this is where, elections have consequences. I go back to, from when I was a little kid, when Carter didn't get Taft-Hartley pitched out. And I go back to, when I voted for Bill Clinton and they didn't get strike replacement. I go back to Barack Obama when they didn't get the Employee Free Choice Act pushed through. And I'm looking at Biden right now and the Democrats right now who the PRO Act isn't going to go anywhere. And even the parts of the PRO Act that would be helpful, like in this scenario where Diana was fired, where they would triple the fines and the fees and the costs associated with illegally firing someone, still can't get that through. And again, this is where elections matter. And elections matter a lot. And we're in this moment, as we talked about at the beginning. In Pennsylvania, Republicans are doing backflips because, we're going to be able to get rid of that mail-in ballot because we don't want people voting. We don't want people participating. We don't want people active and engaged. Because what really this is about, corporate America does not want unionized workers. They don't want empowered people like Eric. They don't want people who are going to not be intimidated. They don't want that. They want people who are going to passively sit by and absorb their abuse, passively sit by and take the crummy wages, the worsening benefits, the longer hours, and not do anything about it. To me, that's where unions come in. It's that important. It's that important, in my view. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast. All there archived. Take the program on your time, wherever you want to go. It's right there for you, thericksmithshow.com. Every place where you can get the podcast. Any of your favorite host sites, we are there. Also, remember to follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Subscribe, share, all of that stuff. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.